Can you place Jesus in that time period and tell us the relation and what might have happened?
Well, we were speaking about the resistance movement among the Jews, and I said it began around in the time of Pompey in 63 BC, and that this was the popular movement and runs all through the period. This resistance movement didn't stop. In the 40s BC, we had bandit leaders that Josephus, attacks. A man named Hezekiah. These are all charismatic, kingly type leaders. The Maccabean family was destroyed by Herod as he came in the 50s and 40s. With Roman help, Herod took the temple. The Pharisees recommended opening the gates to Herod, but that was not the popular party because the people resisted. And Herod had to storm the city with foreign troops in 37 BC. At that time, it was with Mark Antony's contingents before Mark Antony and Octavius split. The revolutionary moves continued down to 4 BC. So really, from the Maccabean period in around 167 BC down to the uprising in 70 AD, you have 250 years of struggle against foreign rule. Unremitting struggle and revolutionary warfare in the countryside against foreign rule. First against the Seleucids, then the Herodians and the Romans. Now, Herod was a Roman puppet. He was not of Jewish background. He came from a town along the seacoast, a Philistine Greek town. He was brought up in Petra, an Arab area. His father was a pagan priest. He married into a very high class or royal family of Petra. All of his descendants were Arab Idumeans. They were not Jews. But you see, when we speak of King of the Jews, we don't speak of a Jewish king. We speak of a title the Romans gave to kings in the East, and people mistake that. They see Herod the Great as a Jewish king. I would call him Herod the Terrible, Herod the Cruel. He's the closest thing to Saddam Hussein you can imagine. He has 10 wives. He kills wives. He kills his children by the wives. He kills anyone who resists him. In one story, Josephus has him hiding among the people to listen to what was said against him in a disguise, then bringing these people to Machaerus, which is across the Dead Sea here in Jordan, there to be tortured and put to death, or to Hyrcania, right out here, another Herodian fortress not far from here, to be tortured and put to death. He tortured and put to death everybody who resisted him. And this is
natural break.
Whenever you're ready.
Right now. Yes, sir.
So he took these people to places like Hyrcania, another fortress up the road here out in the wilderness, and tortured them. Josephus tells us all the Maccabean members of the previous Sanhedrin, he killed except the Pharisees who he supported. That's the point about the Nahum commentary. The Nahum commentary is talking about a period where the Pharisees hold sway, as they did at an earlier period, that is the Herodian period, where crucifixion was prominent. And that's what they're focusing on in condemning the Pharisees and the people who seek smooth things. So Herod promotes the Pharisees, but the rabbinic groups portray the Pharisees as the popular party. Well, we can see from all this resistance that they're not the popular party. The people never do what the Pharisees say. They're the accommodating party. They oppose the Maccabees, which is why Hanukkah was never a popular festival in rabbinic Judaism until latter days. They oppose any of these revolutionary leaders, and they support Herod and the Roman putting the Herodian family in power. So 37 BC, the Herodians take over finally imposed by Roman army. The revolutionary movements don't stop. In 4 BC, at the time of Herod's death, he doesn't die immediately. He's very sick. He's taken out to that Machaerus place I mentioned, where he has some hot baths given him and so on to try to revive him. But the rumor surfaces that he has died. There's a huge popular uprising led by zealous teachers. We might call them rabbis. People, as Josephus calls them, who know national tradition. It's at this time that Josephus describes the revolutionary movement in 4 BC founded by Judas the Galilean. He's mentioned in the Gospels, and that movement then gives rise to the Zealot and Sicarii movements that move all the way through the 1st century, finally to the uprising against Rome in 66 and the Masada last stand in 73. So we get a whole movement. We have 250 years of revolutionary strife. In fact, if you count in the Bar Kokhba War of 132 to 136, we have almost 300 somewhat constant strife. Now, if you look at the Gospels, you are in a peaceful Galilean countryside. But Judas the Galilean comes from Galilee. In fact, Jesus' birth in the Gospels is equated with the time Judas the Galilean in Josephus starts his movement. I think that Judas the Galilean's movement is, in fact, this messianic, quasi-messianic movement, which has different, offshoots. One offshoots these extreme Essene zealots, or extreme Essenes that we have here. It's hard to tell if they're Essene Sicarii, Essene zealots, what they are. They're militant messianists ready for the day of vengeance, if nothing else. They all participate in the final war against Rome. Josephus makes clear that the Essenes participated in the final war against Rome. He even says, being an interrogator of prisoners, the Romans were awed by the unshakable determination that the Essenes showed under torture not to eat the forbidden foods or things sacrificed to idols, and the fact that they would rather go to their death than blaspheme the name of the lawgiver or call any man Lord. He admits that. And we know there was a man called John the Essene who participated in the first days and was killed in the uprising against Rome in 66. So we have 300 years of constant warfare. What's my problem with the Gospels? We're walking around in a peaceful Galilean countryside where we're exorcising evil spirits, casting out evil demons, curing, walking on waters, taking sheep, putting evil demons into their bodies, running them off cliffs. This is not the Galilee of Josephus. There's not a question of the unrest, of the unhappiness, of the revolutionary activity. This is the Roman peaceful countryside of Asia Minor where Paul is operating, or of Greece, or even Rome. This is the Roman Empire proper. This is not Palestine. This is written by Greeks from an overseas perspective. This is art, who are trying to picture what they think Palestine looked like. This is retrospective Palestinian history. So, and I think also we have a Paulinized Jesus there. I mean, there were no tape recorders there. These guys didn't memorize Jesus' speeches. In fact, in Greek history, it was the norm to put your ideas into the hero's mouth. That's what Plato did to Socrates. That's what Thucydides did to all his military leaders. It was the style of Greek history to make the speeches in the way you thought the speaker would have made them. Even Josephus does this in his Jewish war. So to my mind, the question of the historical Jesus is still out there. It is unresolved. But I have suggested in my work, this one in particular, James, the brother of Jesus, the key to unlocking the secrets of early Christianity and the Dead Sea Scrolls, that once you have found the historical James, you have in fact found the historical Jesus. Why? Because the Gospels are so overwritten and so retrospectively written that no one's been able to agree on who the historical Jesus even is. That's why we have had the quest for the historical Jesus since Albert Schweitzer's time, gone on for almost 200 years. That's why we have the Jesus Seminar out in Western California. But these people take votes on what they consider historical and what they don't consider historical. You can't do this by votes. You have to do this by history, proper history. Now, the question that I ask is very simple. Who would have known Jesus better? The person who grew up with him, who was born with him, who succeeded him in his leadership to Palestine, who were witnesses as the Gospels seem to present to the crucifixion, or his enemy, a person who in his own lifetime opposed Christians, admitting that he even put Christians to death, never saw Jesus in his lifetime. Only afterwards did he have visions of a kind of heavenly Christ Jesus that he speaks about in an ecstatic, what he calls apocalypsios, visionary manner. Paul, that is. Well, the view of all history is that Paul knew Jesus better, and these other people knew Jesus less well. But that argues against any rational historical criteria. The real historian would have to say that those closest to him, those who spent all their time with him, those who knew him better. Well, who was that? James, the brother of Jesus. So I say that all these wonderful people and all these decent and well-meaning people, from Tolstoy to Victor Hugo, you name them, the great minds of Western civilization, just did not have a critical sense of history. And they didn't exercise. Political leaders, whoever speaks about Jesus. All these people speak about Jesus as if they had intimate knowledge of him, as if they knew him perfectly. But the documents we have are documents of art. Some people say art is truer than history. Poetry is truer than history. Yes, what people believe happened is more important in some respects than what actually did happen. But I'm a stubborn historian. I don't believe that what people believe happened is more important than what actually did happen. I believe what actually did happen is more important than what people believe happened. So if you want to start your study of the historical Jesus, the first place to go is to James. And I end this book by saying, who and whatever James was, so was Jesus. So in others, that is my view of the solution to the historical Jesus riddle, and it's a very simple one. So let's go and find James. Why? Because the materials about James are not overwritten by retrospective theology. We have more materials from the extra Bible sources about James than any other early Christian figure, including John the Baptist and Paul and Peter, who have left no trace in the extra, or very little trace in the extra biblical sources. And we have a vast amount of material about James from Nag Hammadi, from the early church fathers, from Josephus, to apocryphal gospels, to a whole host of sources, so much that I could write a 1,000-page book. So you asked me about the historical Jesus. What would have been his relationship to these revolutionary movements? Jesus is executed, even in the scripture we know, as a Jewish revolutionary. Well, whatever you want to say, crucifixion was something the Romans imposed on seditious, insurrectionary behavior from the Spartacus uprising in the 80s BC onwards. The Roman historians tell us that the Roman roads from Rome to Naples were so crowded with crucifixes in order to show the people that revolutions like the Spartacus one were not acceptable. That's what crucifixion was. It wasn't something imposed on a few thieves. The word thieves in the gospel actually means bandits. So the only historical bit of information that Paul actually knows about Jesus is that he died as a crucified person. Paul shows no other information. You would think that someone who...
Sorry, I gotta stop you. This is,
Sorry about that.
the mic is being pulled.